Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life. Not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter at vmspod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. You can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/vmspod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/vmspod and patronize me. All right, I am off to Barcelona. I am recording this before I leave, but I am setting it to post once I'm there. You guys know the drill with something like this. If my flight goes down or I get knifed to death this weekend, everyone's going to be embarrassed, I guess. They're going to get this podcast after I'm already dead. So this will stand as my possibly final testimony to the pointlessness of human existence, I guess. I haven't set up any. Well, again, I'm not assuming anything's going to go wrong. Don't assume like that. But just in case it does. Anyway, I don't have any shows set for Barcelona or any podcasts. I mean, there's just too much work to do. It's really tight packing the full audio studio along with the suits, dress shirts, and all the other fancy stuff I have to do for my day job. And I'd also like to actually see the city this time. I've got 2 days beforehand, plus a couple of afternoon evenings that I get to go do something. So I did, of course, pack my mini recorder just in case there's a podcast emergency or a podcast catastrophe, I guess. That makes more sense. I don't know if I mentioned, but Crazy Ex-Girlfriend's new season is starting soon. So well, anyway, you'll see it. This week's guest, apropos of none of that, is Hayley Campbell. Now, I first saw Hayley as a character in the autobiographical comics of her dad, Eddie Campbell, who I regard as one of the finest cartoons ever. Seriously, you should get his complete Alec, A-L-E-C, as well as his Bacchus comics. They're legendary. He was also the artist for Alan Moore on From Hell, the really great Jack the Ripper book that the two of them collaborated on. Anyway, about Hayley. Over the years, she managed to graduate from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions and become an actual, human being. Last bunch of years, she's been a writer for a bunch of different online venues, most recently and currently BuzzFeed, where she does these really interesting and entertaining articles, usually profiles of very strange and obsessive people. And I just adore them. But the great thing about Hayley really is her Twitter presence, which is how we connected. In fact, you should stop listening right now and just go check out her feed. She's on Twitter as Hayley Campbell, which is HayleyCampbell. I'll wait. Okay, you've had enough time. On Twitter, Hayley comes off as fun, kind of sexy, dangerous, into boxing, really into Sylvester Stallone, candid about just really embarrassing aspects of her personal life, and a total comics nerd, which is great. She lives in the UK, so we made plans over the years to get together when our orbits kind of overlapped. The big problem with this was she has a memento-level lack of short-term memory due to a bike accident. So 1 or 2 times that we were supposed to meet up, she flat out forgot. I didn't take it personally, I swear. Anyway, still, I harassed her. We managed to get together in New York this August when she was over in the States for a family event. The main problem was that It was hotter than balls that day that we got together. We were just grotesque, sweaty messes by the time we reached my pal's apartment to record. Luckily, my pal left her air conditioning on full blast, so we were able to record in relative comfort. But still, I had to filter out the AC noise, which makes the audio a little tricky. That was really my long-winded caveat for, hey, there's some weird noise artifacts on the episode. Anyway, the thing about Hayley Campbell is that she is not my standard sort of guest. When I record with young people, they tend to be cartoonists or novelists, people who are, producing book-length stuff steadily. That's not what she does. Or she did publish a book a few years ago, The Art of Neil Gaiman. But this conversation is less about her body of work and more about getting an idea of who she is and how those online and IRL personae, sort of overlap or don't. And what a youngish person who writes for a living thinks about having a long-term career. That's the sort of thing that I'm fascinated by because I took the easy way out. I went into trade journalism. I picked another path entirely a couple of years ago and seem to be doing pretty well with it. But I wonder about the mindset of people who are young and trying to make a living writing. But this isn't like a boring career counseling thing, although we do get into that a little bit. It's really, about exploring somebody who's really goddamn fun. Anyway, here's her bio, which I lifted from HayleyCampbell.com, which hasn't been updated in a long time. Hayley Campbell writes for a bunch of places, but then who doesn't? She's written a book about Neil Gaiman, The Art of Neil Gaiman, from Ilex HarperCollins, and if her face looks familiar, it's probably because she sold you comics once. Find her stuff on BuzzFeed, New Statesman, Vice, McSweeney's, The Guardian, The Debrief, The Comics Journal, The Rumpus, Channel 4 News, Front, Planet Notion, and Boing Boing. This, I should note, is a step up from her bio at BuzzFeed, which simply reads, Hayley Campbell is a staff writer for BuzzFeed and is based in London. So there's not a lot of facts about her, but she's Eddie Campbell's daughter, raised with lots of cartooning people. That's all you need to know. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Hayley Campbell. So what's it like growing up in comics?
In comics?
Yeah. What was it like being part of, I'll say comics royalty because I think your dad is the shit.
Uh-huh.
So, which is a good thing in America.
Mm-hmm. It means that you grow up, your sense of smell is different because you get to smell so much BO over your life that I now can't smell BO. And well, it's like 100 degrees outside and I can't smell anything.
Which I'm very thankful for. I thought you would have said something to me by now, so that's good to know.
Comic shops smell terrible and I barely notice them anymore.
Yeah.
So that's that I think that is the main thing of growing up in comics. I thought when I was a kid that a teenager was someone who was employed in a factory to write and draw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics. It's weird. And Alan Moore is just, well, he's a wizard. Even as a kid, you know that he's a special weirdo.
The beard is a tip-off.
Yeah, but he's not, you don't worship him because of the comics because you haven't read them yet. Mm-hmm. You worship him because he does magic tricks while your dad is getting drinks at the bar or something. Mm-hmm. He does this, he did one for my brother. You know the one where you pretend your thumb has separated? Blew our minds. He's one of the best people to meet as a kid. When I worked in a comic book shop for 5 years, in London. And one of my jobs was to sit beside people when they were doing signings. Mm-hmm. And
you were muscle, obviously.
I was the muscle, yeah. And it was also, it was kind of security. So like when Alan Moore was signing with Kevin when they did a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen thing, it was my job to try and get rid of the people who would bring in, for instance, a big crate of mangoes and say, I've carried this on the train for hours, Alan. You have to take it. And Alan would go, that's very sweet of you. I don't actually want it. I won't eat them. If you give them to me, I won't eat them. So you should take them home and you should enjoy these mangoes. but Alan, I've carried these all the way for you. You have to take them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to go, thank you very much for bringing the mangoes, and then just stick them out the back. But one of the things I noticed was that, you know, Alan Moore fans now have children, and sometimes they're
Which is pretty remarkable in itself. But
I know. Comics people have sex occasionally. Who knew? And, you know, they'd bring along their little kids, and Alan would, like, the dads would be standing in line. The dads have been waiting in line for hours to talk to Alan, and they've got it. They've been practicing what they're going to say in their head, and they're sweating, and they're holding their books. And as soon as they get to the front of the desk, Alan ignores them because there's a kid there, and he wants to talk to the kid. And I've heard other people in the line bitching because they're still waiting in line, and Alan stopped signing books to talk to this little 4-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I can't believe this. What, can someone hurry him up? And like, no way would I ever hurry that shit along, because that kid, their eyes always go huge because he looks like a wizard, and he's a big guy. And when you're a kid, you have his entire attention. Mm-hmm. He's incredible. Yeah. And I know exactly what that's like, so I would never stop that.
Does he have kids of his own?
Yeah, 2, Leah and Amber.
Gotcha. They grew up weird? They grew up like completely normal and turn into Tories or something? Is that which would be funny and ironic.
I can't tell. Leah does comics. There's a picture of me and Leah standing side by side, and we look like we're completely different species. She's tiny and I'm enormous, mm-hmm. and I'll have to send it to you.
No, you're I was going to say selling yourself short, but no, really. My wife asked, you said she's 6'1"? I'm like, yeah, so she says. So, you know.
Did I lie?
No, you towered over me. I was glad we could walk down the street, and I was the second tallest person. You know, it's a good feeling. Who do you geek out over when you meet him? Besides me, of course. When meeting in person, within comics, within the real world.
Within comics, I met Dan Clowes when he was signing at Gosh, and 8 Ball remains my all-time favorite comic book series, and I reread it all last year when it came out in the big Fantagraphics slipcase thing, and it is still perfect, and I love it. But I met him years ago, only briefly. I didn't get to be the muscle for the Dan Clowes signing. He was signing with Chris Ware, and I begged to be able to do that, but my boss wanted to do it himself. He was like, no, these are big guys. I'm going to sit downstairs.
Oh, the indie credibility.
Yeah, so I had to sit on the till and watch people giggling as they came up the stairs. But I met Dan Clowes just as he was leaving, and he shook my hand. And
you never washed it. It's hard to believe.
It
looks grotesque, but
but he commented. He said, "This is the cleanest toilet I have ever seen in a comic book store." And I was so proud because I had cleaned it. So when I interviewed him a couple of months ago, when Patience came out, I said, you probably don't remember me, but we have met and we're fans of each other's work. You liked my bathroom.
My toilet. We're supposed to meet next week at some point at the Small Press Expo. You're going to miss out on this whole, comics festival circuit, while you're out here. But
he's so nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I once sat at a table with him, the Hernandez brothers, Burns, and someone else, and it was just as I was starting out with this stuff, and I was just so cowed, and I was like, I'll just hide out here on the side, And then Bob Sikoriak sat down next to me, realizing I was the guy who was kind of hiding, and just started a conversation, and we hit it off, and have stayed pals ever since.
Yeah.
Which was nice, but yeah, there was a degree of the, oh my God, you're people whose work I've worshipped and adored from my college years onwards, having started out as a superhero geek in my childhood.
The Hernandez brothers are sweethearts.
Yeah, I pitch Jaime every so often on this, and he always just smiles and takes my card and never responds, which is fine. It's okay. I'm not really sure. There aren't a lot of people I would nerd out over in my present day, but there are people I'm a little afraid I wouldn't be able to interview well.
Chris Ware, I would shit my pants if I had to interview him.
Yeah. Does it make you nervous, or or are you just overwhelmed by his work?
I love his work, but I've never met him. Well, he was in the shop, but I didn't meet him properly, and he didn't comment on the bathroom. So, but I don't know. I think I would get really nervous. I was nervous interviewing Dan Clowes. I find it so easy to interview people I don't like or care about. And I tear myself apart when I have to talk to somebody who I worship. I interviewed John Carpenter a month ago, and I was a sweaty mess. And I'd spent days reading things, going over stuff I already knew. And then I got him on the phone, and I'd heard that he was difficult. And he was so nice, and he was just laughing, and he was bitching about people, and he was like, well, the reason I don't make movies anymore is they're just so much hard work. Who can be bothered? And it was he was nice, but I had been a wreck.
Yeah. I find it helps over preparing, except for you. But, no, I actually wrote stuff down, trust me. But yeah, there's a degree of, to me, the biggest thing is trying to ask something they haven't been asked yet.
Yeah.
Or trying not to ask the same thing that they've been asked again and again and again.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
I interviewed Jonathan Safran Foer last week, and I haven't written it up yet, but I think it would be... I don't think you can interview Foer these days without commenting on how the internet is treating him, because he is like a shorthand for the terrible white man that you have to move away from. And when I met him, he's just a nice guy. I really liked him, and I wanted to talk to him about, like, what do you think about how you've become, and like, he's an internet joke. He's like, he's a meme. And he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I went, and I had to explain. I was like, well, they say this. And you can hear on the tape me squirming and wanting to die. And he signed my book afterwards saying, thanks for the reality. Oh, it's horrible. And I had to ask him if he really, did you leave your wife for Natalie Portman without checking with Natalie Portman first? Yeah. You can't interview him without asking him about in that case, there are certain things you do have to touch on because they're so goddamn interesting. But, and he rolled his eyes and he said no, and I was like, okay.
I didn't exactly leave her, because no guy's going to be honest about screwing up that badly. I did get hung out to dry once in a live interview with Ben Catcher. 60 or 70 people in the audience, and Ben, I asked him about a quote from a profile of his in the New Yorker, and he said, that doesn't sound like anything I ever said. Like, okay, the New Yorker does better fact checking than the National Security Agency, but if you say they didn't say that, then okay, let me cross off these 8 questions and we'll go on to Q&A. It was kind of entertaining, but again, dealt with it as well as I could. How do you describe what you do?
I don't know. It would really help if someone could do it for me.
That's what I wondered.
So I can explain my job to my parents.
Because you don't exactly say journalist, because we don't live in a world with journalism.
I'm not a journalist.
And you're not a content provider, I pray to God.
Oh, God, I can't even say the word content.
Yeah,
it bothers me when I'm listening to the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, and he's always going, so when I'm making content for the thing, he's like, and he's asking the guests, so what kind of content do you consume? And you go, wow, that's horrible.
I only squirm more when he says empire, but go on. Sorry.
I write stuff. I write a lot more stuff than actually gets published because of various political things that are going on in BuzzFeed right now. I don't actually have an editor. So
you would think then more stuff of yours would just start showing up.
Just go buck wild. No, but I'm getting away with just writing about what I want to write about right now, which is...
There are a couple of recurring themes.
There are themes
to your work. The obvious 3 to me were death and taxidermy, boxing, and we'll say, just as a catch-all, sex. But I'm sure you've got a narrower, definition for it. Is that essentially the Hayley Campbell beat?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't really do taxidermy anymore.
Okay. Death in general?
Just death in general. That was my beat for a bit, and then somehow death segued into boxing, because they're basically the same thing. I think they're the same thing.
Elaborate.
Any boxing story will end in death or heartbreak, and it makes for great stories. I've just became obsessed with, how did this guy ruin his life? This is how it happened.
What started you on boxing?
whatever this job I'm doing, which isn't journalism, makes me quite angry, and being in London makes me quite angry, and I was going through a breakup which made me quite angry, and so as a anger management thing, I thought, well, why don't I just go and punch stuff? So it was really just like a fitness thing that started. And then because I'm a person who becomes obsessed with things, I suddenly got into Norman Mailer. That's how that happened. But I love boxing because not only am I in a basement with no internet, I can't, even if there was internet, I wouldn't be able to scroll through Twitter, which also makes me angry. It's just a designated few hours a week where I have to think about nothing but this, otherwise I'll get punched in the face. It's kind of like a therapy thing.
In an actual competition?
No.
Okay.
I don't want to ruin this.
No, you probably have headgear or something. Not that headgear helps, but you don't have to worry about traumatic brain injury or anything.
I've already got that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna. That's actually my last question. But anyway, so about the anger thing, which is a weird way to ask, but because I'm in my 40s and trying to de-angerify from a lot of things, why do you stay somewhere you're not happy? Or does anger make you happy?
I don't.
Not to get all therapy-like on you. I did that with Carol Tyler a few months ago, and it was a really great conversation, but I had to charge her for the hour afterwards. It was
I actually go to therapy and talk about why I'm angry. Haven't figured it out. I've been doing it for a year. Why are you angry? Why do you say? I don't know why. I'm thinking of maybe leaving London, but I don't know where I would go that would make me happier, or like a bell jar if I just take my anger with me. Like some Charlie Brown storm cloud.
What do you consider home? You got Australia?
Not Australia.
Yeah.
I feel like an alien in Australia. When I go, because I've got a weird accent, you've probably noticed. No one knows what it is.
No, it sounds just fine, trust me.
No one knows what it is. It's not Australian. It's not English.
I'd never heard you speak until we got together just now, and I was wondering exactly. I'm like, is it going to be like Irvin Welsh, where I needed subtitles for the conversation, or
My dad's Glaswegian. I always had to provide subtitles for when my friends came over after school. What the fuck is he saying? No, I don't know. I go to Australia for holidays now, but my parents got divorced and sold the family home. The family dog died. There's not really, like, I don't have a thing where I've got an old teenage bedroom where all my posters are still up. Yeah. All of that stuff is gone. And when I do go to Brisbane in Australia, I'm visiting alien houses, and all the furniture is different because when divorces happen, people are like, I don't even want the sofa. I don't want that because that sofa reminds me of whatever this is. And so I'm going to buy all new shit. So when I go to these houses, I recognize nothing. And right now, I'm house sitting for my dad in London while he's in Chicago getting married. He's another one he's happy wherever you put him.
Yeah.
He doesn't consider Scotland home. He doesn't think Australia's home. He's just, where all my stuff is, that's where I'll be. I don't care. So all of my stuff, because I'm house sitting, all of my stuff is in a lockup somewhere on Holloway Road. So all my books are in boxes, my desk, and I'm living out of a suitcase. So I feel like I could go anywhere now, and nowhere is home, which makes me kind of agitated all the time. It's like their flat in London is totally lovely. Yeah. But it doesn't feel like my house. Even though I've got the whole place to myself, I'll still do everything in my bedroom like a teenager.
Yeah. What posters did you have on your wall?
I had The Cure's Boys Don't Cry, of course. I had a massive PVC poster of the From Hell movie poster, one of those ones that take up an entire wall, that I got from the movie cinema when the movie came out.
which your dad was the illustrator for the comic version that,
Yeah.
just for the audience that doesn't know necessarily. Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. And you showed up in the footnotes, I think, in Alan's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a little picture of me in the, holding onto my dad's leg. I'm
that's
a
what I
little
remembered. Yeah, that's
toddler.
right.
Yeah. So that was on the wall. And every ticket from every gig that I went to, David Bowie, it was up there and stuff. And I don't know where all of that stuff is now. It's gone.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything metaphorical about that for you? Or is it just the, holy shit, I'm a wanderer?
Well, when my dad moved after the divorce, he sent all his stuff on a ship to England. And
that trick never works. That's how they lost most of my mom's stuff, or her mom's stuff, sending it over to the U.S. from
Oh, yeah?
London. Yeah.
It worked this time. It just took 6 months to get there. But he included in all of his boxes were the boxes of stuff I packed up when I was 18, just before I left home to come to England, 19. So he said, "Oh, I'm bringing your boxes, and I'll give them to you when I get there." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." I have no idea what's in them. They were packed by another person and it's a collection of all the shit I thought was important when I was 18. I don't want any of this stuff. Don't tell him because it costs money to bring over.
That's what I always say. Don't worry, no one's listening. It's okay.
Yeah, it's sketchbooks from my high school art class and name tags from a DVD store I worked in. Yeah. Why do I want that?
I just spent this past couple of days out in St. Louis with my mother, who had loads of my stuff from the past 45 years, and wanted to know if I wanted this plaque from when you played soccer in 1979 and these pictures and your diploma. I'm like, no, don't need a thing. But you understand, for some people it's important to have that sense of...
I'm really into not having stuff right now. I will collect books, but stuff...
Yeah,
I've moved so often in the last 10 years.
Trust me, the books will weigh you down.
So much, but they're easier to fit into boxes. Working in a bookshop makes you a genius at packing when you leave.
You just see the world like Tetris.
And I know that from working in the comic book shop that diamond boxes are your ultimate primo box. They're the right size. You can't overpack them. They're just amazing.
So you're a content provider.
I'm a content provider on the internet.
What do you actually want to do? Besides, where do you want to live? And I hate to sound all guidance counselory, but that's.
Do I sound lost to you on Twitter?
No, but I just wonder, given the weirdness of my own career arc, I just wonder how other people who are in sort of inflection points where I was in life, what they see. Given that you recently turned 30, 25, you recently turned 30.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because don't you have a no guests under 50 rule? Do you still have that?
I always say that to make them feel bad, but I figured in our case, and I've had a few this summer who've also been really good. And I realize it's just envy on my part. The people younger than me have actually achieved something,
right?
And pursued their dreams, as opposed to editing a trade magazine for 15 years and then becoming a lobbyist like I have. So it's a weird career path to take. But you've published one book, which we'll talk about soon, but where do you see what you do in 5 years?
I would like to write books.
Yeah.
But it's weird because I always knew I wanted to write, but I've never done anything on purpose. I've never applied for jobs. Mm-hmm. I've never really chased up editors. And I before I came over to the States a couple of days ago, I was like, when I come back, I'm going to start chasing people, because everything that's happened so far has been an accident.
Career by attrition served me very well for the first 20 years. People either died or quit ahead of me, usually quit, but occasionally died. So that does help. But yeah, actively taking a agency in your life turns out to be a good thing too. So.
I've never thought about it. I write articles for other magazines just because someone will see that I've tweeted about it. Oh, we need someone to write about the man who fell to earth. I saw you do a tweet this morning. Can you do it? Sure. Yeah. So I don't know why I just can't actually do it. I'm not lazy. I work hard.
Networking is a different thing, though.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm doing. But I would like to write books. I'd like to write novels. I've never written a novel, but I would like to. That's a lie. Everyone's got like half a novel on a computer.
What would you write about?
I've got an idea for a book about death that I want to do. And half a book proposal. I'm basically in a weird point where I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that, but it's just, I find it interesting, and you'll probably come out of this with more anger. So
my dad doesn't grill me like this.
yeah. It's okay. I don't talk to my parents, so it's all right.
But yeah, in answer to your question, I have no idea. I would like to be less angry, and I'd like to be at a point where I can sit in my house and not be around people and just write books. Because when I'm writing about something, I get really obsessed with it, and it annoys me if I have to go and do something else, even like talk to someone in an office. The office thing is not working for me. Even the BuzzFeed office, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's not an office. I've worked in bleak, hellish offices on, industrial wastelands. And the BuzzFeed office is full of children who are happy with their lives. Yeah. And I sit in the middle of it.
Glowering.
Writing about death.
And what's it like? You mentioned before we started recording, you're now the oldest person in the office.
No, there are some people who are 38.
Oh, geez,
but they're like
ancient,
on the news team.
Whore. I mean, yeah,
they're the real journalists.
Right.
I'm one of the old guard.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to. One of the younger girls asked me to contribute to a list that was like advice for young women from older women. I was horrified.
How'd you feel about that?
I was horrified until I saw the questions, and I was like, wait a second. Like, you people are still taking the pill? There are other options, ones that don't make you fat. Okay, so maybe I do have some advice.
Yeah.
Turns out I am old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, how does that feel? Do you feel you have life lessons other than contraception? Do you feel you picked up on anything that?
I right now I give less of a shit about most things, which I think helps.
Yeah, that's the 40s realization for me was, and I still get incredible anxiety over some stuff, but learning not to give a fuck about a lot of things.
Whenever I've interviewed older people, John Carpenter, who I mentioned, and John Waters, who I love. I've noticed
great interview, by the way.
I've noticed that the older they are, the more they're like, who cares? Who gives a shit? Whereas the younger ones, they've got something to prove, and the middle ones are just pissed off.
Yeah.
Whereas old guys are just like, who gives a shit?
Yeah, and that's part of my not liking interviewing people under 50. It's really people under like 60 or 70. Because the older they are, they've seen all the cycles go by, and there's a lot of stuff they can look at, somewhat jadedly about things they once, wanted to kill somebody over. So.
Yeah, the things that matter stick around, the things that don't fall away. Mm-hmm. But the when you interview people in their 20s, they don't know that. They think everything is important. Yeah. Not everything is significant.
Yeah. But you need to learn what is and isn't. Not going to university.
Yeah, I'm a bum and a fraud.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, I've been writing imposter syndrome my entire life, so don't worry. But is there something you regret about that at all, outside of the credential?
What I regret is that everyone else seemed to have 4 years where they just got to dick around.
That's what I wonder. Do you regret anything you would have gotten?
The dicking around.
Yeah. So you don't regret any of the opportunities it would have provided outside of...
I don't think they could have taught me anything about content providing that I couldn't figure out on my own.
Yeah.
But I did miss out on the dicking around. What I did instead was I worked in a DVD shop and just watched movies.
Work for Tarantino.
Yeah. Well, I worry... I don't worry. I wonder what I would have... how different I would be now if I had gone to university and had hung out with people my age instead of men in their 40s who were obsessed with whatever movies they were lending me. And I've divorced myself from my own generation in a way, and I've done it in a couple of ways. When I was 13, 14, 15, I had a series of knee surgeries. And if I have a Wikipedia entry, this will be the point where like I had polio and was bedridden.
I will tell you that was the most disappointing part of researching you.
I didn't have a
thought you were
Wikipedia?
big enough to have a Wikipedia entry.
Oh, it's such bullshit. I
at least
wrote a
by
book
height.
and I still don't have
That was
one.
my thought. I was like, well, clearly Haley's going to... No, nothing on Wikipedia.
Nothing.
Losers.
Which is bullshit. But yeah, when I had knee surgery, my dad's friends would, like the Three Wise Men, would bring over gifts to keep me entertained.
Mm-hmm.
So someone brought over all of Twin Peaks on VHS. Someone else, it was like lots of English comedies and who did The Singing Detective? Dennis Potter
yeah.
things. So I was watching all of these things that no one else had any idea about. When my knees finally got healed and I went back to school, no one knew what I was talking about. What the fuck is Twin Peaks? I used to write all of my school essays listening to the soundtrack to that. Mm-hmm. But no one else knew about it. And then instead of going to university with everyone my age, I hung out. All of my friends were in their 30s and 40s. And they all worked in comic book shops and stuff. So I'm really like a 45-year-old man. Mm-hmm. That's what I am. I rarely see people my age. It's getting better now. It seems like people have caught up. But when I was 20, all of my friends were way older.
I remember hearing John Hodgman in an interview a few years ago where he said basically as a 13-year-old, he was waiting to catch up to who he is now, which is a 45-year-old overweight guy carrying a briefcase.
He's thin now.
Oh, yeah, it's true. He dropped a bunch. But yeah, it was a couple of years ago. And he's like, that's who I was then. I was just, I wanted to be this guy in his 40s. And, I just was stuck as a 13-year-old. So. Now, is there any... because in America, we assume England is completely class-ridden and everything is clearly demarcated as to who fits where.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Was the lack of university an issue, or had it been?
The only time it has ever been an issue is when I tried to get a job in the comic shop. I mean, the fucking comic book shop. And the guy who... and this was the first time I went for that job, I didn't get it.
Yeah, because you didn't have enough experience being raised,
God, can
Campbell.
you imagine the fury? I didn't get a job in a comic. This is insane. But then they called me back for another job, but he did ask me in both interviews, so why didn't you go to university? And it felt like he was being my own dad never asked.
Yeah.
He didn't care.
You should have said that From Hell money dried up, and that was...
Yeah.
That was...
I've got nothing to fall back on now. Yeah. So that was it. And eventually he got over it. And I was able to perform my tasks at the comic book shop without any degrees or PhDs or whatever the fuck.
Which is a massive achievement.
I think so.
The bathroom cleaning.
I'm excellent at cleaning toilets.
So your first book, we'll say first because there's going to be more of them.
Yeah.
I hope.
Fingers crossed.
About a family friend, The Art of Neil Gaiman, which I haven't read, I'm embarrassed to say, because I was going to when we were going to record last year and you never got back to me and I burned it. And I'm just kidding. But what was the process researching and writing and not writing about somebody you know very well, writing for an audience that doesn't know this person as a person? And then what was it like taking him seriously as a literary figure? Well, I don't mean facetiously. I mean, really just taking the significance of what he's done over the course of his career.
It helps that I met him much like when I met Alan Moore as a kid, but more so for me. When I met Neil, I was 6, and he came over. He was staying with us, and I got kicked out of my bedroom so that he could have my room, and I was on the sofa. And I didn't really mind because I knew that my dad had told me that he was the one who wrote that Sandman issue with the cats. Yeah. And I'd never read any of the other Sandmans, but my dad used to read that one to me, Dream of a Thousand Cats. Yeah. And he'd do all the voices. And my copy was completely held together with sellotape. Dad still got it. It's falling apart. Mm-hmm. So I started off as a fan before I met him of his work, and then I met him and I just thought he was the best thing ever, and he showed me a laptop. It was the first time I'd ever seen a laptop. Yeah. He read The Day I Swapped My Dad for Two Goldfish off his... I was one of the first kids he tested it out on. and we just became friends. And I've read all his stuff, and that book was another thing that wasn't my idea. I didn't pitch that book. I didn't push it uphill. I did absolutely nothing. I got that job because the editor who wanted to do a series of books about comic book people, there was another one about Alan Moore. We'd both worked at Forbidden Planet, or Titan. It's a falling down building in South London. And we both hated our jobs and just used to goof off on the internal messenger, talking about whatever. And so when he became editor somewhere else and he needed someone to write this book, he suggested me. And that's how I got that just by not doing work and dicking around instead. So
career by attrition.
Yeah, well, that's how I got my job at BuzzFeed. That's how I got the job before that, editing some women's magazine. Someone had seen me dicking around on Twitter. When I worked in the comic shop, they used to try and say, get off the internet. What are you doing? And I'm like, come on.
I'm advancing my career.
This is my way out. I don't want to stay in this basement. Writing the book was fun because hanging out with Neil is fun, and it meant I got to go to his house, and he trusted me to go through all of the stuff in his attic, which is boxes full of old porn magazines from the 80s, because he used to write for Fiesta and Knave.
Oh, it's just research.
Yeah. But he, back when he was in his 20s, when he thought all of this stuff mattered, he had saved everything. He'd cut them out of the magazine, so he didn't care what else was in it. But it meant that when I was going through the box, you could either look at it as a collection of interviews with John Cooper Clarke and Rick Mayall and all these people, or you could flip them over and it's just half of women's bodies. Yeah. Just headless women with these huge 80s bushes. Yeah. It was a very specific porn collection, just half women. That was fun, and I
like that nothing's a metaphor for us. This is great. This is great.
I got to go to Scotland with him for a week, and we just hung out. We'd go walking through the mountains and then come back and drink tea and then talk for hours. There's no one else I like hanging out with more than Neil. So it was
go on.
It was a brilliant job, but it was so much hard work because you're dealing with real life and you're also dealing with people's memories, and people remember everything differently. So before the book was published, it was sent out to various comics people who had helped him in his career and who had been involved in things. And a lot of people were saying, well, that's not how it happened. And then they tell you how it did happen, and you go, well, that's not as interesting as the way Neil said it happened. So I'm just going to leave this. Neil will succinctly tie up a story. He'll give you an anecdote with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Whereas other people go, no. He phoned her, and then she phoned him, and then there was a letter.
Truth is so much more prosaic than this.
Yeah, and you go, oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
Was there also a concern about the level of fandom that he has, not wanting to disappoint, I guess, people who are game and maniacs?
Well, as a fan, I kind of know what they would want.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think if you were just a journalist or content provider coming at this,
there's got to be a better term.
No one's come up with one yet. Yeah. Internet. What do? I do internet. Yeah. What was I saying?
Game and fans and their reception, or your sensitivity to writing.
If anyone else was writing it, they wouldn't have had free reign in Neil's attic. Yeah. I don't think so. And B, they might just be telling the story as they're finding it, as like this is what happened. Whereas as a fan, I kind of know what everyone knows already. So I made a special effort to dig into his 80s porn magazine career because I found that interesting, and it was really fun digging through old vintage magazine shops in Soho, trying to find the one issue where he wrote a short story he thinks is so bad he's never republished it anywhere. And I scanned it and I said, Neil, can I put this in the book? And he said, yes, under the proviso that you have a little note saying that this has never appeared anywhere for good reason. I thought it was fine.
Okay, I was going to ask, is it that terrible?
It's not terrible. It's just not great.
Yeah. How do you characterize, I guess, his literary significance? Because it's one thing to say, great comics writer, fantasy, young adult, etc., but all of those things are ghettos of a sort. Yeah. And I know we're supposed to be beyond the whole genre ghetto thing, but but where do you see him as a writer?
I think he's a personality. I think if he wasn't as nice and open and available to his fans, I don't know if he would have been as huge.
Yeah.
Like when Neil says he's got a new book coming out, I don't really go, oh, is it a novel? Is it I'll just
it's a phenomenon.
It's whatever he made. He's a content provider.
Yeah. Did you teach him anything about online presence? Or
there was one time. No. There was one time he asked me to rewrite a headline for something because he wanted it to get hits. So
you're the SEO.
Yeah, he phoned me and he said, "What would BuzzFeed do?"
And he thought, "This is how low my life has gotten."
And I was in the fire escape stairs at BuzzFeed, going, "Well, what they would, you have to put a number in it." It was for a refugees thing, and it got
good
huge
cause,
hits.
at least.
So yeah.
Talk a little, if you can, about the online self and the real life self. I mean, do you find that massively different? And again, I don't know you, and don't worry, like I said, because no one's going to listen and say, "Oh my God, Hayley's actually like this or that." But what do you, given that you're one generation younger than me, I came up, the internet showed up at very, very primitive form when I was in college, and only really took off when I was already in my mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
So that disconnect between an online and real life self is very different than I think for someone like you, and of course for someone younger than you, it's completely native. But where do you see that schism, or how much of a split is there?
I see a lot in my office. I see it. People who are huge personalities online are tiny mice in real life.
Yeah.
I think I'm more of a loser in real life than I am on the internet. But in terms of personality, I don't think I'm presenting a different one. Mm-hmm. But I know people who do, and who try and game the system. Oh, I get more numbers if I do this. I don't know. It's just a stream of consciousness.
Was there any point of pride for you in terms of either thresholds of numbers of people following your stuff, or somebody retweeting your shit who you actually, idolize and adore?
Aja Argento is currently favoriting pretty much all of my selfies and tweets. I don't know where that came from, but every time it happens, I go, yes.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Like, I can't think that I have other people, but for some reason that is such a weird one to have.
Maybe she picked up on the Russ Meyer picture that you've got in the profile, that faster pussycat kill.
Yeah.
Who were you reading growing up? Not comics, but what informed who you are as a writer? Besides growing up with a great autobiographical cartoonist for a dad.
I read a lot of Stephen King and a lot of R.L. Stine, and a lot of books that just had, raised, red, drippy titles.
Yeah.
My dad gave me a lot of comics to read. One of my favorite books was who was it? Mobius did it, The Eyes of the Cat. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things that you half remembered. It was like an old TV show or something, and I only knew what it was a few years ago when some guy was getting married, and what happens when you get married is you have to go to your local comic shop and try and sell all your comics. That was always great. So they try and and they had this guy had a bunch of old issues of Taboo, the Steve Bissett.
Yeah, where
horror
From Hell
anthology.
was originally serialized. So.
Yeah, and
By the way, complete set. Okay,
of course
just
you do.
so you're, I'm that much of a nerd. So go on. Yeah.
So I was just flipping through them, and I found the Eyes of the Cat. It's they're on yellow pages, which I remember from a kid. And what had happened was my dad had cut out the pages of From Hell to file, and then said, well, this is about a cat, I'll staple these together. And he drew a cover for me with a black cat on it and gave it to me. And the letters, it's not a comic, it's pictures with large text below it. So it was like a picture book, except it's horrifying. It's this eyeless man sending out his huge raven to go and steal some eyes for him from a cat. And then there's a picture of the raven pulling the eyeball out of the socket, and it's got all the tendrils and like juice.
Yeah.
And bringing the eyes back to this eyeless person, giving it to him, and because they're cat eyes, they fall out, they're too small. And he says, next time bring me the eyes of a child. For some reason I loved this thing, but because it didn't have the name of the person or a proper cover, I had no idea what it was. And then this guy getting married gave it to me, and I was completely over the moon.
This is like your Proust moment, except really, really dark. That's good.
Rosebud.
Did you find comics more important to you than prose, as far as your development as a writer, or not? Are there prose writers you also, emulate?
I love, but that was when I was a teenager more. Yeah. I love David Foster Wallace and essay writers. I love Gay Talese talking about people you don't think about. Nicholson Baker, I love. But the comic book thing, I really liked it because no one else at school really knew what it was.
Yeah.
And it was by people I'd seen.
Yeah.
Or
was there ever an issue with someone in school, a teacher or student, having any idea who your dad was?
The only time that became an issue was when I handed in some homework that was on the back of just some piece of paper that was around the house, and it was a photocopy of a murder scene from Hell. So I handed in some maths homework on the back of a disemboweled prostitute, and then they had to phone up my parents and say, Hayley's brought in this horrible thing.
Oh,
and
no, that's just Dad's work.
Yeah. He had to say, I drew it.
But there was never a, I know who your father is sort of thing? That never...
No.
Good.
Whenever you had to say what your parents did for a living, the teacher would be momentarily interested because they'd go, oh, comics, like Peanuts. And you go, not really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not really. Like, at that time, he was drawing From Hell. So it was just, my dad's got pictures of dead prostitutes all over the place. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's like Peanuts.
I was going to go, with the really dark vision that Schultz had. But anyway, that's
But he did come in for... he came in and he was dropping me off at school or something, and he was drawing cartoons on the blackboard. Mm-hmm. And the kids were like, wow, your dad can draw. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then one time for show and tell, I was... it was my day for show and tell, and I was running around the house crying because I couldn't think of anything to bring. And my dad gave me a CMYK like transparency thing it was from the Eyeball Kid, and it was just showing how a color thing is printed. Yeah. And he said, take this in, they'll love to see it. Yeah. Of course the kids didn't give a shit, but the teachers thought it was so cool that they sent me around every class in school to do this fucking show and tell. Yeah. I was 6 years old explaining how CMYK printing worked.
Which has served you well.
I've never forgiven him for that.
I was going to say, it served you so well as an adult. It's either that or he sends you in with a roll of Zipatone, but that's...
He used to steal all this, like, if I had a coloring book that came with a sheet of square-colored, like little colored squares that you would use to color it in, like pixels, he would go, oh, that's interesting. I'll steal those and use that for a cover of Bacchus. Mm-hmm. He did that with my spirographs. I had borrowed a little rubber stamp off a kid at school, and it was little dancing feet. and he stole it to do the cover of the Dance of Lifey Death.
Yeah.
But not only did he borrow it, he fucked it up by dipping it in different colored inks. And when I gave it back to this kid, he was like, "What have you done?"
One thing that I'd wondered, because of a profile you'd written on Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, and his desire not to be defined as his dad's son in terms of his writing career. How much of that is, getting back to metaphors for your life, how much of that plays in your own sphere? Have you ever thought of writing, you've thought of writing comics. Have you taken up writing comics at all, or do you have a sense of dad's territory? I can't really...
It's not really because it's dad's territory. I don't want to do it. I don't think I'd be good at it. Mm-hmm. He won't join Twitter because he's afraid that I'll end up with more followers than him. That he will be Hayley Campbell's dad.
Yeah, he would.
He would be.
Easily. No. I mean, he's got a following artistically, but they are not necessarily a Twitter overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know.
I like it when I hear that someone who follows me on Twitter spoke to my dad at a convention about me, and
burns his ass every time.
Yeah, and he goes, and Dad emails me, "Oh, some guy came and said hello. You know him. Which guy? I don't know."
Yeah.
That's the extent of...
I've only met your dad twice, and both times it was when he was still living in Australia. We met in the U.S., and both times it was the first day, and it's not...
He doesn't remember anyone.
No, it's not just that. The one time I went to New Zealand, I was not in my most agreeable mood when I got there, and he was a little bit... He just kind of run down. I was like, okay, having done that trip, I understand that it's 24 hours of transit does not leave you bubbly and cheery.
Was he in a pub or somewhere wasn't a pub?
At a festival. So that's even worse. You know.
You should have taken him for a beer. He would have been fine.
Oh, yeah. It's when people's lives or in their careers and your intersection with them revolve around a table and they're sitting and you're standing. It's just, I ask cartoonists about this.
If you're on the wrong side of the table. I don't like going to signings because I think I just assume that I will bump into that person one day. And I live in a city where that generally happens. I do meet that person, and then you get to meet them not as an equal, but you're two human beings rather than a sitting one and a standing one.
Yeah, besides hating London, what do you like about London?
I like my friends. Yeah. They're the only reason I'm there. That sounds so corny, but it's true.
It's
London shits me off.
You get the David Foster Wallace thing. You can be earnest and honest about things. It's okay. Just don't hang yourself. It's all right.
I'm honest and open about liking David Foster Wallace, and you're not supposed to do that on the internet anymore.
Yeah,
People
I got my problems, but we're
it.
different people. So, and I read Infinite Jest in hardcover in 1995. So
how were your biceps after that?
It was work. It was more just the fingers getting the paper cuts and going back and forth to the footnotes. That was yeah. Although there's a picture of a guy who has Infinite Jest on his Kindle, but he put a little posted on it saying that I'm currently reading Infinite Jest.
People keep sending that to me. And also today, there was an interview with Alan Moore in New York Times or something. Yeah. And
he mentions he's become a Foster Wallace freak.
And he says, I will try and not make every answer I'm going to give you about David Foster Wallace, but I'm really into him right now, so that might happen. And it just keeps being about David Foster Wallace. People keep sending it to me. Yeah.
I thought better of it, Although, in a sense, the two of you have that autodidact thing. I mean, I don't think Moore went to university. I think he mentions that he's all self-taught.
He got expelled for
dealing drugs. Yeah, because...
What a hero.
That was the very first issue of the Comics Journal I ever bought back in 90, 91. It was a Moore cover by Bill Sienkiewicz, and he went into some of the early days of becoming Alan, I guess. So besides friends, though, that's pretty much what keeps you
I don't know why I'm there, and I don't know why I stay there. I went there initially because I was born in England, so I have two passports. I've got the Australian one and the formerly brilliant British European one that has become embarrassingly small because of Brexit and racists. England is just becoming very small-minded, and I don't think it's a case of me getting older and just being an and thinking
Realizing.
the world is getting worse. I think it is genuinely getting worse over there. And when I go to Europe now, I feel like I'm like apologizing. I'm sorry.
I was in Madrid last year in the airport, and a Scottish guy behind me saw my passport, and all he said was, "Trump, eh?" And this is October of last year, before things really got serious, and I was like, I just don't. It's so
embarrassing.
I can't, you know. And again, we got not the last laugh. We got a laugh in between when Brexit happened. You know, I could point back at him.
It was,
but,
everyone was laughing at us for once.
Yeah.
It was thrilling. It was a thrilling day on the internet.
So you don't know where you want to live, but not there. That's
No, the newsroom, because I work in the middle of the newsroom.
Yeah.
I exist in an echo chamber of people who politically believe the same kind of things, like the unhorrible ones.
Mm-hmm.
We thought we were gonna win, and the only time I thought that maybe it would go badly was when BuzzFeed did a live question and answer session with the Prime Minister, and loads of and before the students asked a question, they had to say which way they were voting, and everyone was saying, "Oh, I'm voting to leave. Can you?" And I was like, "But you're young people. What the?" And so I was watching that, and I was like, "Maybe this is going to be bad."
Yeah.
But it was the first time I'd seen people I don't know talking about it. And then when the vote came through, I had to go to work in the middle of the newsroom, and it was depressing. Everyone was like, "How?"
Yeah. But at this point, it looks like bureaucratically it won't happen for another 35 years. So
it looks like a massive pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Luckily.
So tell me about traumatic brain injury.
I don't know how much. I can't even tell how much it affects me anymore. But I did.
I kind of figured that was the point. But yeah.
Yeah. My memory is terrible.
Had her off a bicycle?
Yes. So what happened was my bike self-destructed while I was on it.
That was last week's guest also, except he wrote a really great book about traumatic origins of the Bible after that experience.
Oh, so he did something with it.
Yeah.
And I did
But
fuck
yeah,
all.
you're doing a bang-up job.
This is what separates us.
Yeah.
So it self-destructed, and I flew over the handlebars and broke my fall with my mouth. Judging from where all the bruises are, which are not on my hands, I did nothing to try and save my face.
Yeah.
So I smashed my teeth. I had to phone my parents and ask for dental money.
Mm-hmm.
I've never asked for money in my life, but I was...
And the irony being, it was England,
Yeah, I know. And also, I don't want an English dentist.
Right, yeah.
I found a German dentist.
I was going to ask, did you have to do medical tourism to get your...
Well, I asked my friend who... my friend Dylan had recently had some major dental surgery.
Martin Amis moved to America,
I'm
for the
completely
dental.
behind that.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I come from Australian dentists. Beautiful.
Is there any
Beautiful
reputation?
people.
I didn't know anything.
Australian people have amazing teeth.
Okay.
They're not the fake white weird ones that
Yeah.
are all over the place in America. They're realistic but good. Whereas England is horrible.
Yeah.
But I asked my friend Dylan, he had smashed his mouth up because he was walking up a marble staircase at the same time that Boy George was walking down it. And Boy George looked at him, and my friend was so taken with how blue his eyes are.
Oh, my wife would have had the exact same reaction. she would just plots if
Yeah.
Boy George, and boom, 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 down the stairs.
Well, he fell up the stairs, landed on his jaw, and broke his mandible and several other things. So I said, "Who did you?" It was like Hollywood plastic surgery. "Who did you?" And it was a German guy. I said, "Brilliant.
Yeah.
Amazing." Watched Marathon Man and then went. But I had a major concussion. My boyfriend at the time had to wake me up every hour or so the night of the accident just to check I wasn't dead. And ever since then, my memory's been shitty, which is hard work when I'm writing things. I'm always leaving little trails of breadcrumbs for myself so I can kind of figure out what the hell I was thinking.
Like that tattoo of John F. murdered my wife on your forearm.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, like Memento, the movie, is me.
Yeah.
I
always say that about phone calls generally, or when I meet someone.
Yeah.
I'll forget within 3 seconds what their name is if I don't write it down the instant they say it.
Yeah.
Or if they
I
hand me
never
a
remember
business
anyone's name.
card. Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah, just, it's okay. You don't have to. It's fine. I don't have any sort of ego about this thing.
I just figure they'll email me at some point. I remember it better if I see it written down.
Yeah. Yeah,
Twitter,
the act of
Twitter
writing it
people
down
I'll
for me.
remember for some reason. I remember Twitter people I've never met or spoken to, but if they talk to me enough.
Yeah. Am I a huge disappointment or not?
Absolutely.
I figured.
Catastrophic.
But the, again, lack of short-term memory doesn't seem to have slowed you down?
I can't tell. I don't know if I've got better or worse. I can't remember things I've written. But I do get to reread things I wrote and go, oh, that's fine. It's actually really useful if you write something and then stick it in the drawer and let it compost, and then I come back to it as a completely different person.
Yeah.
Who wrote this?
Although I have that also, and I don't even have your excuse. I look back at things I wrote a couple of years ago. I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah, but I'm talking about 2 days ago.
Yeah, that's an issue. Okay. Besides death, boxing, and sex in general, your next beat.
I don't know.
The beat you would want.
I like obsession.
Yeah.
I wrote a thing recently about a typeface that was thrown into the Thames.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
The Dove's type. And I love, it's a story about an old man crossing a bridge in the middle of the night and throwing all these old pieces of type into the Thames.
Which are made of lead.
Made of lead, sinking to the bottom of the Thames just because he didn't want anyone else to have them. Mm-hmm. And then almost 100 years later, a man who's obsessed with that typeface sending marine divers down to try and find them in the mud of the Thames. And I love finding people who are obsessed with things. Even if I'm, I don't care about typefaces. Not really. I know when I don't like one. If someone gives me a menu in Comic Sans, I'm offended. But I have no real connection to the Dove's type. I don't care. But I loved talking to the guy who sent the marine divers down. I was in his studio for 2 hours and just watching someone explain why they did a thing is kind of amazing. Like, you've devoted years of your life to this. Why? And watching them try and figure out why they've done this thing. And I interviewed a guy in the Natural History Museum about mollusks. I don't care about mollusks, but he did. Mm-hmm. And I just love it when someone's super into something. Because I feel a bit wishy-washy sometimes. Like, I'm not as into stuff as I think I should be. And I will be into something, but for a very brief period of time, and then I move on. People who devote their lives to one thing, I think I'm obsessed with them. So I'd like to do something around that, but I'm not sure what.
We'll wait for it. Hayley Campbell, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual Memory Show.
Thanks.
And that was Hayley Campbell. You can find her work on BuzzFeed, and she's the author of The Art of Neil Gaiman, which came out from ILEX in the UK and Harper in the US. But really, like I said in the intro, the most fun way to experience her, beside sitting around all sweaty in a borrowed apartment, is by Twitter. So just follow her on Twitter at Hayley Campbell. That's HayleyCampbell. You'll appreciate the experience. And after the main conversation, I asked Hayley, so, who are you reading? If you want to hear her answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. You can do that at patreon.com/VMSpod or at paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for supporters of the show, including the podcast, patron-only blog, series of ebooks I want to launch, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. This one was recorded at the apartment of my pal Elaine near NYU. So expenses were parking, toll at the George Washington Bridge, iced coffee, and bail money after Hayley punched out a dude who gave her guff when she got shouldered by him at a crosswalk. She's gone back to the UK now, so I'm probably never going to get that bail money back. So if you want to help out with that and defray some of my other costs, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. Special thanks go out to Paul W. Jones, Michael Janizek, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Andrew Mason, Greg Tanner, Zach Martin, and Ron Slate for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories show. We've got the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. David has a reunion project going with his great 80s band David and David, and you can find out more and support that at facebook.com/davidanddavidmusic. And that's it for this week's Virtual Memories show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with the great and somewhat idiosyncratic artist, painter, cartoonist, poet, Glenn Baxter. Until next time, you can subscribe to the show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories show on Twitter at VMSPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. That'll help us build a bigger audience. And until next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.